Imagine you're 5 years old. Officials come to the door. They tell your parents to hand you over. They warn your parents that if they don't agree, they'll be thrown into jail. You cry, you fight. They restrain you and put you in a cattle car that's already crowded with many other Indigenous children. You travel long distances to a building you've never seen before. Your hair is cut off. You're given a number and a new name. Your clothes are thrown away. You're forbidden from speaking your language. You're forced to accept a new religion, a new way of life. Your days are strictly regimented and there's abuse, physical, mental, sexual, spiritual. You're forced to do child labor and you're punished harshly and sometimes sadistically for your mistakes. The education is subpar. You're taught practical skills instead of the standard public school curriculum. You live in fear of sexual exploitation by the priests and nuns in power. You and your friends get ill often due to the poor living conditions, and there isn't enough food, so you're suffering from malnutrition. You're cut off from your family, including your brother and sister who attend the same residential school. Your parents are considered privileged if they get you back for the summer holidays. This was the experience of 150,000 Indigenous children in Canada. There were nearly 130 such schools. And these terrible injustices didn't happen long ago. The last residential school closed in 1996, only 25 years ago. 70,000 Indigenous children who attended these schools are still alive today. Recently, 215 little bodies were discovered buried at just one residential school. These deaths were undocumented. The graves were unmarked and forgotten. 215 children, some as young as 3 years old, were kidnapped and sent to school, never to return. No one told their parents what had happened. These kids just disappeared, as if their lives had never mattered, as if they had no worth to anyone and wouldn't be missed. And this wasn't an isolated case. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was tasked with investigating the legacy of the residential school system. 6 years ago, it documented the deaths of over 6,000 children at residential schools. That means 1 in every 50 children died. And what of those who returned home? Residential schools taught them to hate everything that they were, to feel inferior. They stripped them of their family relationships, their culture. They denied them love. These children returned as adults to their families and communities, unable to speak the language, unable to integrate, looking down on their way of life. What's worse, they didn't know how to raise children or how to show love. They were accustomed to abuse and they perpetuated it on others. When we talk about alcoholism, drug use, unemployment, poverty, depression, suicide, we can't divorce the challenges that Indigenous communities experience from the way that they were treated. Canada wanted to assimilate them, to civilize them to the mainstream white man's ways. Canada thought they had no worth. They were thought of as ignorant, savages, a burden on society. They needed to be taught how to live, and Canada continues to treat them unfairly. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action. 6 years later, only 10 have been implemented. 6 calls to action concerned children who died at residential schools. None of the 6 has been implemented. Canada continues to separate children from their families to this day. Indigenous children are overrepresented in the child welfare system. Over 52% of Indigenous children are in foster care. They make up only 7.7% of the population. What's more, our government has spent millions of dollars and many years fighting survivors in court. And many communities still don't have clean running water. Canada promised to fix this, but hasn't yet delivered. Food insecurity, poor housing, and inadequate healthcare are just some of the challenges Indigenous communities face. Are you shocked by what I'm telling you? What will you do now that you know? As settlers on Turtle Island, as Muslims living here in Canada, we have a responsibility to do what we can to try to right these terrible wrongs. It starts with learning. We've got to take the time to learn about the residential school system and actively listen to people of First Nations, Inuit and Métis backgrounds. We need to read the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we need to advocate. We need to have conversations with our friends and family. We need to speak up when we see or hear stereotypes and prejudices being uttered against Indigenous peoples. And we've got to hold our elected officials accountable. Ask them what they're doing to investigate the missing Indigenous children. Demand that they implement the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Let's also support Indigenous individuals and communities. Let's donate to support their community organizations. Let's amplify the voices of survivors and elders, and let's celebrate Indigenous culture and ways of life. It's 2021. We can't erase the past, but we have an obligation to work towards a better future. A future that embraces truth and reconciliation and truly cares about achieving justice for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I'm Safiyyah Ally for Let the Quran Speak.
If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe, and please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.